Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. And we're talking about all the books that I read in 2024. And so the title is a little bit of clickbait because I actually read a lot more than 120 titles, but not all of them were trackable using Goodreads because that is the main thing I've used since like 2014 to track my reading. And obviously not everything gets put into the Goodreads system. So there's some offshoot things that I was not able to track. I also read a lot of webtoon, so yeah, which you'll see that pop up here in this video. But regardless, this video will have like sections and timestamps down in the description. So say you don't want to hear me talk about all of the fiction books that I read. Maybe you just want to know about all the manga that I read, which is definitely a hell of a pile of different things that I read, manga, comics, that whole thing. Or maybe you're just curious about sort of the metaphysical books or the health books, all that good jazz. So again, go to the timestamps to jump around, or if you want to sit here and listen to the whole video, I thank you very much for that. But basically in 2024, my original Goodreads goal was to read 72 books. So I did read around like 120, 121 books. So I definitely went up and beyond that goal. And at the end of this video, I'll talk a little bit more about my goals for 2025 as far as my reading goes. If you guys want to see that, again, it will be time-stamped. But the other thing I want to mention is that for each section, obviously with each book that I talk about, I will talk briefly about what I thought of it, if I remember enough about it to, discuss it. I don't want to have this video be too long, so I'm going to try to go through these a little bit fast because, again, it is like 120 different books. And also, I will mention like what I rated it as far as like, Goodreads uses a system of like, 1 out of 5 stars or, such. So that's how I will be using the rating for each of these books, just so that you guys are aware as I jump around and I talk about each one of these titles. But we're just going to jump into this. I'm going to actually start with the section that is the newest thing that I've introduced into my reading habits, I guess you could say, and that is audiobooks. So you would never have caught me listening to an audiobook a couple years ago because I love my physical books, but given that I, in 2024, I moved, so I had a longer commute to work, so I decided to start playing around with the audiobooks. I will say that this group of audiobooks, I was perusing and looking for things that were, either on sale or they were priced a little bit cheaper, just because audiobooks can be a little expensive, okay? They definitely are in comparison to what you could pay for the physical book a lot of the times. Again, for like the physical one versus paying for the audiobook. And I know why they cost the price that they do, because you have a whole voice actor and editing that goes into that. So I understand why, but it makes me a little nervous right now. Again, sort of exploring this whole new book media for myself of wasting my money on something I'm not going to enjoy listening to, if you catch my drift. So there was a little bit of hesitation in 2024 for how much I was willing to spend, but I did still purchase quite a few audiobooks. So the first one that I listened to was Uncovering Japanese Myth, and I loved it. I gave it 5 stars, and again, it was just a good introduction to a bunch of different Japanese mythology and folk tales. So if that's something you're interested in, I definitely would recommend that. I did not find the audio offensive as far as like the voice actor or anything like that. So again, very much enjoyed that. So the next audiobook, so I listened to Tender is the Flesh. And this was a book that I had on my like TBR for a while. And after I finished, I will say, I really liked the voice actor for this audiobook because it really matched, like he did a fantastic job reading it, and it matched with the whole tone of the book and stuff. And it's not a very long one either. I will say that it's not a thick book. It's also not a super long audiobook as it is. And when I finished it, I was just curious to see what people were rating it. And this is a book where there's very much 2 different camps, where you're either on the camp of people who love this book or you absolutely hated this book. That's pretty much the consensus I saw when I was looking at it. And for me, I did really love this book. I did rate it 4 stars. So again, it does have a very abrupt ending. But, and I saw some people complaining about that. It's also a very, WTF ending, I will say. It just kind of comes out of nowhere and it ends very abruptly. But kind of musing back on the experience of the whole entire story as a whole, I think that kind of ending works very well for the book. It matched the whole entire point of the book, which again, if you're not familiar with this story, I'm not going to tell you what it is. It is very gruesome. I will tell you that, but it's very much a commentary on kind of like society norms, what is considered normal and how quickly humans adapt to their environment, I will say, is kind of a part of that. It also makes you think about what you eat, I will say, because again, it's all set, a large part of it is set around the idea of like the meat industry. I will put it that way. I really enjoyed it. It is a very kind of weird book. The way the pacing is again, it's like you're seeing snippets of this man's life and like from day, and also in the lens of dealing with each section of this meat business that he was passed down in his family. Now he's been running, and again they had to change it because of things that happen in the world. If you want to start getting nitpicky with it and trying to delve into the science of like, does this make any sense? I don't care. I don't heavily care about that part of it. I care more about, did I enjoy it as a book and did I find it interesting? I definitely did. It also, I guess you could label this as a little bit of like a horror. I think it's maybe more of a thriller. I have to like double check what exactly the genre is that they label for this book, but it definitely has piqued my interest because this is like a genre book I've never really read and explored up until this point. So if you guys have suggestions for other books that are similar to this or horror books, definitely let me know because I would love to explore more of this genre because I think there's a lot of good stuff that can be, I can find and get enjoyment out of it, especially at this point, because my taste in books, I've noticed from the mass group of my fiction book collection versus what I'm feeling now is not really in a line anymore. So moving on. So kind of jumping back into my some of the older books that I used to read, I did pick up Goddess of Light because it is part of it's by PC Cast and it's part of that. It's like her adult romance series. And I've read a number of the other books in it, usually the physical ones, but I was like, okay, let's listen to this audiobook one. I rated it 3 stars, which for me, a 3 stars is like very in the middle of the road, like not horrible, but there's some issues, or I get maybe something about the pacing or the vibe, like I wasn't feeling it. And it wasn't horrible, but not much to say. Again, if you're kind of interested in again, if you like mythology, that's a big part of why I even got into the series, because it is very mythology and like fairy tale kind of based. I should say more mythology than fairy tale, but this one deals with the god Apollo, and also features Artemis. So if you're interested in that, you might enjoy it. It's also set in Las Vegas for the most part. But this whole series, they're all standalone books and they all kind of follow a very similar beat where you have like this kind of independent woman, modern woman who kind of gets thrown into this whole thing with this god or whatever the situation may be. And so it's still a romance. It was all right. I would not say, from what I remember, it would be my favorite out of the books I've read in this series. So moving on to the next one. This was next to like maybe Tender as the Flesh. This is probably, I would say there's like 3 audiobooks that I listened last year that I really, really liked. And this is one of them, and it's The Taken Ones. And I really, really enjoyed this audiobook. And this is like the second book recently came out. This is one where I'm a little bit tempted to just buy the audiobook, even though it's like almost like 28 or 30 bucks, because I really did love the first audiobook. I thought it was really interesting and had a twist to the whole entire story that happened very early on in the book that I was not expecting at all, and that added a whole nother layer onto it. And so it's like a detective mystery solving book, which again is not really a genre that I've read a lot, which is very weird because I've definitely watched a lot of like things like I grew up on X-Files, I've watched Fringe. They all have this kind of like Castle also. I really like that show. So again, they all have kind of like this cop buddy kind of investigating thing, but then a little bit of twist of something else. So this book definitely had that. There was sort of this play of like, is there a supernatural element to this book? And yes, there is technically a supernatural element to it. So yeah, I again, I haven't read a lot of books in this genre. So there's only like a few, maybe like one or two from the past that I read in my younger years. I would not say that was a great example of the genre necessarily, because there was issues, like I have issues with some of the plot of those other books, but I love this one. And I know that I'm pretty sure the second book that just recently came out is told from the male counterpart of the duo here. So I'm very interested in that and how that plays into the rest of the story. But yeah, really like that. I rated it 5 stars, obviously. Now, of the audiobooks I listened to, this one is probably, I think, the one out of all of these that you all will probably raise your eyebrow and like, why were you listening to this? And I'll explain why. So this book is called Morningwood. Everybody loves large chests. I can't even say it with a straight face. I rated it 4 stars because while I did enjoy like the overall concept of the book, and there was definitely some fun. So the whole point of why I even chose to explore this book was I read the reviews and everybody was saying like, oh, this is so funny, you know, it's an interesting concept, because basically the whole entire book is told from the perspective of a mimic. So that was interesting. And especially I liked also the way it was written, in the sense of like, you're basically watching this mimic level up and how that like affects his skills. And you kind of get like at the end of each section, there's like a review of like his skill sets. So if you're somebody who obviously enjoys like D&D, or you're an anime fan like me, you're going to be very familiar with a lot of the concepts that are in this book. And that's a big part of why I even decided to listen to it. I thought it was going to be kooky and funny. And also we know that, or at least some of you probably know who have been following me for a while, I'm a little bit of a, I enjoy some adult content, okay? So, especially with like my manga and my anime and all that stuff. So I wasn't going to shy away from this book. With that said, this is 100% a book that was written for straight males. Like that is very obvious by the description of the women. And that is like the biggest issue, obviously, with this book, is the way that women are depicted and some of the things that happen to the women in the stories. So that's a big part of why I took off a star for this book. While overall I did enjoy it, yes, those parts of the book are problematic and can definitely be very triggering for other people if you attempt to read this. So again, this is not a book that I would generally recommend for you to try to read unless you can handle some sensitive topics that are not done in a way that like spreading awareness about sensitive topics, if you catch my drift. So yeah. I was not super shocked by that part of the content in the book, because again, I knew it was geared towards, obviously, probably a very specific type of straight male. And also I've been watching anime and manga for many years, or should be reading manga, watching anime, and again, the content in this book very much falls in line with a lot of anime, which for a lot of women out there, you're going to take issue with it. I know a lot of women are going to take issue with it because I see it on the regular. Even when I get to my manga section of this video, there's some manga that I really, really love and that are also very much exploding in popularity, that I have in my, and of course, because they're becoming so popular, there are people who are nitpicking it and taking offense to some of the content in the manga. And like, I would say like it's apple and oranges in comparison to this audiobook. Like, you have a reason to be upset about this audiobook, and I would say like some of that sensitive content in it. While with the manga in particular I'm thinking about, I think people need to calm the hell down a little bit, because I think they're missing the point of those certain scenes in the manga, what they're trying to I think they're done in a very different way, if that makes sense. So moving on from that one, we have my third, probably most favorite and surprising audiobook, I feel like, that I encountered, just because I wasn't expecting it to be like a dual readership one. I didn't pay attention, I think, when I bought it, that it was going to have two different voice actors. And this is, I think, one of two books that I purchased in 2024, audiobook wise, that had dual, like, multiple voice actors. And this one gets a gold star because I really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 stars. And that was called Between. And so it was very much a fantasy. It was very, like, kind of wholesome. Like, there was no adult content, if you catch my drift, really in it. Like, it was adult characters. It is an adult book, but there wasn't any of the spicy stuff really yet. I'm very curious to see if we, like, I don't know what is the deal with this particular book, if when a second one is going to come out. I didn't really see any information about that yet. But basically, like, the story, the first part of the audiobook is following from our main female lead. And basically, she's moved around a lot, and she doesn't dream. Like, she had a dream as a child, and then all of a sudden in her childhood, she stopped dreaming. But then she moves to this town with her best friend, and because she's like a substitute teacher. So she moves to this little town, and magical hijinks. So if you're like a fan of like the show Once Upon a Time, you'll really like this book, because it definitely has a little bit of like the vibes of Once Upon a Time, but better. It has like a piece of high fantasy in there. But what was surprising about this audiobook for me was that, again, it's like it told the whole perspective from this woman and the story up to a certain point, and then all of a sudden, I say there's like still half of the audiobook left. I'm like, well, that was the end of that story. So what's coming next? And basically it's, I was very surprised by it. I wasn't like, at first I was like a little bit taken aback, but then I really got into it. Basically, the second half of the audiobook is the same story retold, but from the perspective of the main male character that we have in it. And it was so entertaining, because getting to see, and again, he's a particular character who's set in the fantasy aspect of this world. I'm not going to give away spoilers, but it was so interesting to see like his day-to-day life and what he was dealing with, while at the same time trying to deal with the real Earth realm side of things, and this woman that he just met and all that. It was quite funny. There was definitely some funny parts in this book, so I really enjoyed it. I really would like there to be a second book. I just don't know when that is happening, but yeah. And lastly, I shouldn't even really include this in my wrap up of books I read, because I didn't really read it, or I should say listen to it, this last audiobook, because I bought it. It was priced fairly cheaply, and it was actually multiple books in one, and I DNF'd it really hard. It had multiple different voice actors, like doing different characters throughout the whole entire thing. And so this series is called Never Kiss a Fae. So of course I was intrigued by that, because I like my fairy content. And yeah, like this is, I think, falls under the new young adult category. So basically we're talking college age, but with everything else that would be in a normal adult book. That's like literally the only difference about this category. In my personal opinion, I think it's a really dumb category that they made up, because it's essentially just an adult book, except you're following a college age kid, like in their early 20s, like 21 to 22 or something like that. It's like, okay, it's just an adult book. So that's my different soapbox. But point is, I heavily DNF'd this because I did not like any of the characters. It was like grinding on my skull, like the way it was written or the way it was acted. I don't know. I mean, it's probably the writing, but it just was not the vibe. It felt too much like a YA book, which, if you don't know, is just young adult book, which generally doesn't have like full description of spicy scenes. It's intended for those of like the age 15 to like 18, sort of. While again, the new young adult category is intended for those like 18 to like 25, just to clarify that. But it was written in a way that felt like a YA book, which I'm just like, I used to read so many YA books, and now it's just not the vibe I'm looking for anymore. And I just could not handle this audiobook. I don't know if I'll ever try to attempt to listen to it again, but I just did not like any of the characters. The way the main lead female character is just, again, it's one of those situations where basically this girl character is like this special magical person who has this amazing powers and stuff, but then the whole entire time she's acting like, woe is me, I have these powers, I have all these hot guys coming after me, flying at me from here, and like, oh my god, I just want my normal life again. Nobody realistically would have that reaction, okay? Like, the whole reason anybody reads these type of books is literally because they would like to have that fantasy. So nobody realistically in that situation is gonna be like, woe is me, I just want my regular height, like my regular college life again. You want to wake up like at 6 a.m. and go to your 8 a.m. class and wait and sit there for like 2 to 3 hours and then have to do pop quiz. Like, you want to have to pay bills? Like, I get it's a fantasy book, but come on, man. Like, there's a line here. That's why I really liked the Between book, going back to that, because you had an adult woman who was faced with this fantasy situation. And while at first, yes, she's trying to figure out a way to get out of the situation that she's getting forced into, essentially. But in the end, she's like, you know what? I'm going to concede. I'm going to just go with it because I don't really have another out of it. So I'm just going to go with it because I'm going to protect the people that I've come to know and like care for. So again, much more my vibe in the way of doing that concept of like, oh, well, I'm struggling with accepting this whole magical thing, but let me do it in an actual adult manner instead of like a child. Like that, and this is literally a character who's aged around like 21 or 22 or something, if I remember right, because they were legally drinking. So, like, I get that, 20, like, your 20s, you're not that much of an adult, okay? Like, especially if you're still in college. But there's a certain level of adultness you have to pretend to be, at least. So that's my soapbox on that. Did not like it. Did not like it at all. I'm sorry if you are maybe a big fan of this series or something, but I just could not. And I really wanted to, because it was a situation where it was like, okay, you had multiple guys, and maybe she was going to choose more than one of them, which it's like, we love some progression. Like, we love some progressive relationship moment. Quit the fucking whining, though. Like, goddamn. I didn't say it in my rant, but yeah, I only gave Never Kiss a Fae 1 star, and also I DNF'd it. So usually when I DNF a book, it's getting like 1 or 2 stars most of the time. So just because I forgot to say it. Moving on. That closes out my audiobook section in rant about the audiobooks that I listened in 2024. And now I think the next section we are going to jump into is going to be the metaphysical books and like magical based books that I read in the year. So let's jump into that. All right, for all my witchy people, here are all the books that I read that are under sort of the umbrella of spirituality, magic, basically that whole realm of things. So, and now we're talking about physical books, so I can actually show you the physical book. But, so the first one I have is Moon Power. So this I gave 4 stars. Again, it's a very good basic sort of outline of, really it's focusing more on, in the sense of like astrologically, where your moon is placed, but you can still use this information in the sense of like, okay, the moon currently is in like the sign of Aries. So they do have like some rituals, some little spells and stuff that you can work in with that. So you can use it in both ways, whether you're looking at like, again, because they have like a section of the Aries moon woman and what that means. So you can use it in both ways. It talks about like your sexual nature, your lunar superpower, like all of that. So, but it's very consumable. It's not too complicated. So it's a decent like intro if you want to start exploring this topic. I do think that there's other books, especially if we're talking like your natal chart, and that information. There's more books that better expand on this idea in a deeper sense than this. This is very like intro, baby witches first moon book kind of deal. So, but still, it has good references to like quickly grab if you need, to start something. So that is what I'll say about. So the next book I have is Chiron. Again, this is definitely astrology based. So if you're curious to learn more about Chiron, learn more deeply about it, I ended up giving this book only 3 stars, and I'm not sure. I think part of why I only gave it 3 stars was just purely based on just how the book was written out. I don't know, maybe something about the way the text is. It's a lot of information, but I don't know, maybe something about the way it's organized I wasn't a huge fan of from like my vague memory about it. But again, if you want to dive more deeply into this topic, it will help you to learn a little bit more about just Chiron and what to think about it. Like chapter 9 here is Chiron in aspect to Sun, Mercury, Venus, Moon, Mars, and Jupiter. So if you have Chiron in aspect to that, there's some information here in this book that's definitely going to help you. I might have just rated it a little bit more harshly at the time. I would need to maybe look through this again, and maybe I'll change my rating at some point. But again, at the time, I gave it 3 stars. I think there was just something about when I was reading it, maybe I wasn't as into it. Yeah. Next up. So something I got very into like the last few years was medical astrology. And so this was like the 3rd book in a series by this particular author. And so this is Medical Astrology in Action. And what did I rate this one? I rated it 4 stars. So again, for the most part, very solid information. It kind of builds on the previous books in the series, because I think one was like a good like overview if you weren't familiar with medical astrology, while the second book was specifically for physicians. Like it was intended for physicians to use it as a part of like their practice. So it was a little bit more specific. And then this one obviously is talking about the transits, which is still a topic that I'm learning and understanding with the transits. So if you want to think about your medical astrology specifically with things moving around your natal chart and whatnot, then this is the book you want to focus more on. Next up, so this is the second book that I've gotten in kind of this series and by this particular author, and that is Shedding Shadows. So basically, this is going over the astrology of 2025. And so I originally got his book on the astrology of 2024. And again, it's a very helpful overview of what to expect. He has it broken down into like the major things that are going to be happening for like certain days within that month. So like for January, whatnot. What did I rate this one? I gave this one a 5 stars. Again, it's helpful information. So he starts with that overview for like just like everything, but then you go into the back and you look specifically for Gemini and Gemini rising. So this is based on your sun, or again, your rising sign. Your rising sign is going to be the most helpful if you're not familiar with that, because again, it's going to specifically talk about your house placements, which is very helpful, but you can look at these for your sun or your moon or whatnot. But yeah, I actually opened up. So I'm a Cancer rising, so this is the whole section for me. And again, it does something very similar to the beginning of the book, where it goes through all of the dates and how it's affecting you, again, thinking about your house system. So again, definitely recommend. It's a really great resource for like quickly reviewing, like, hey, what's happening on, November 20th. Let me look at that and see what it says. There's a new moon that day or something, and like how that could affect you. So again, for anybody who's interested in tracking their astrology and looking at all that, it's very helpful. So next up, I have this book, which is very, very thin, and it was just a very quick read. And I ended up giving this like 3 stars. Again, it's very thin, so it's still like it was interesting, but at the same time, the information still felt very general, if that makes sense. So again, it's a really quick read. So if you're interested in this topic, definitely, it's worth giving a read, because you'll finish it pretty fast. So again, very middle of the road, but had some interesting things to start thinking about. Maybe again, an introduction to research deeper into the topic. So this is a interesting book. I ended up rating this one 3 stars again, because part of why I rated it 3 stars. So this is the Anunnaki connection. So this is definitely teetering. I guess you could say everything in this category of like this chapter in my books could be referred to as pseudoscience by some, but this definitely started teetering a little bit more onto that, and like very heavily onto like some of the conspiracy stuff. And there was certain stuff in this, in like I think there was like interviews or something with certain people that I just like, I was like side-eyeing it. Like, I don't know if I really believe that, but there's other information in here that was very interesting, especially if you're already a little bit familiar with this topic. Then you're going to recognize, like, again, if you've researched anything about the Anunnaki or anything like alien related, you're going to be familiar with some of the topics like I am. But I don't know. There was just some things about this book that I just was, again, side-eyeing. I can be a very skeptical person. I can't say the word correctly. So again, like, I love my supernatural, my UFO stuff, but there is certain things where I'm going to look at it and question, like, where are you citing your sources? Where are you getting this information? Like, is that really the case, or are you just taking something and twisting it to fit that narrative? Like, there's a lot of that comes into this whole realm of things that you have to be very critical about, I think, for me personally. But regardless, it wasn't a bad read. Next up, we have the complete book of Demonolatry by S. Connolly. She does a lot of really good books, so this was an interesting one. What did I rate this? I rated this 4 stars. Again, it's pretty solid. If you're interested in this topic, I think it's a solid book to start with. It talks about some of the sigils, some of the hierarchies. Like, it's an interesting book if you want to explore this realm of the magical side of things, which I think is worth exploring, even if you never intend to do anything with it. It's still good to know and explore. Again, I'm very much eclectic in my sense of the information I like to collect and look into. I don't like just sticking with one particular dogma. I like to explore all the different options and see what all of them have to say. So next up, we have King, Warrior, Magician, and Lover. So this is talking about, the archetypes within males. Now, I read 2 previous books by a completely different author. One was centered on like using goddesses as archetypes for women, which I was already familiar with that concept. And they also did a companion one, which was using gods as the archetype with males, which I really, really enjoyed. And I thought those were really interesting. So of course I wanted to see this book because it's written by a man versus where the other 2 were written by a woman. And I ended up rating this like 2 stars. I think for a lot of it, like after a certain point, it's actually written by 2 men. I kind of was starting to skim information. I don't know. There was just something about it that I didn't jive as well with it as I did like the previous books I have on sort of this idea of looking at archetypes with people and using some sort of like, again, this is using the King, the Warrior, the Magician, the Lover, while the other books, again, maybe a big part of why I responded better to those was it was using mythology as the basis, which I'm more familiar with, so it made more sense to me probably. But yeah, again, if you're interested in this topic, I think, as I say with any of these books, it's worth, if you're interested in it, go ahead and pursue it. This is my personal opinion. So next up, we have Stephen Forrest, who I have so many of his books astrologically, like for astrology. And this is the Book of Pluto. So if you're somebody who has, or you're just interested in Pluto, or you have Pluto in a prominent placement in your natal chart, this is definitely going to be a very helpful book. I love all of his books because I like how he organizes his writing, and just how he writes. He makes it very easy to understand. And so I'm pretty sure, what did I give this book? I gave it 4 stars. So for the most part, again, it's going to be very helpful to you. Again, a lot of times to certain portions of the book, I'm not reading super deeply on it because it doesn't necessarily apply to me or to somebody I know. So I'm usually going to focus more on those parts of the book that are going to focus more on me or people that I know, while other parts I'll just kind of maybe skim when we're talking like natal chart stuff. So next up on the same train of Stephen Forrest, we have Skymates, which is the first book in this series, which is basically talking about like synastry, composite charts. I think the second chart is talking about composite charts, if I remember right, because there is a second book that I haven't gotten yet. And so I rated this 4 stars. Again, I'm going to rate all of these fairly highly. So same concept. If you're interested about this topic, definitely explore. Again, I just like the way he writes, and he actually wrote this one with his wife. Next up, we have a book that honestly I don't really remember why I didn't rate it, like why I rated it this way, because I just, again, maybe that's part of why I rated it the way I did, because I just don't remember what I was reading in it. I gave it 2 stars. Again, I seem so mean when I look at what I rated stuff, but I don't know. Like, I just, for the life of me, I can't remember why I rated this so low. But there's got to be something about it that I just was like, about. But yeah, karmic astrology. I don't know. I would need to like go back and like maybe try to reread parts of that book. In a similar vein, we have this one that was very much like an impulse buy for me. And I also rated it 2 stars, which is The Magic in Your Genes, which is basically combining the idea of like ancestral, like magic, as well as like your DNA. I think this book could be definitely be helpful to some people. I just, again, something about it I just didn't jive with very well, but it's an interesting idea. I'll give it that. But yeah, again, 3 stars is like in the middle of the road, and a 2 stars is gonna be like, like there was a lot more issues I had with it than I did positives. Next up, we have Bird Magic, which I gave this 3 stars because, again, I think it's a very good basis to start with. If this is an area that you want to start looking at as far as like magical practices go, and obviously it doesn't have every single bird in the world listed because that would be way too big of a book. But I've always been a huge fan of birds and like bird watching and all of that. So of course I had to get this book. And for the most part, again, it's not a bad book. I think it's a great resource for a quick reference to something. And then I would definitely look into deeper resources about maybe certain topics. It's still a good quick reference if I want to know, like, hey, I saw a robin outside my house randomly and something weird happened with it. Like, I wonder what some magical references to that might be. So, not a bad one. Another one, I rated this one 4 stars because, again, interesting how it combined tarot, and obviously it's tarot and astrology. So this was cool because it went a little bit deeper in the sense of like, obviously, like certain cards we already know have astrological, like zodiac associations as well as planetary associations, but this went even deeper in the sense of like also including the like decans of certain things that were like, for example, like the 6 of Wands is Jupiter in Leo. So yeah, it's giving you even more like deeper associations, which can just add more to whether you're reading just personally for yourself or you're reading for clients. I think this can add some interesting layers to, how to look at, what you're doing with your cards and your readings. So yeah, interesting read. Now this book, I got it because it is directly related to a industry that I've been working in for coming up like started in 2019. I don't know, like almost 7 years or something. So I picked up this book on a kind of a whim, Death, Rights, and Rights. And I rated it 3 stars again. Very much like it is an interesting read. It was also very funny to see. It is very critical of looking at like the traditional funeral industry. So again, if you don't know, I've been working at a funeral home for many years. So it's like, it was quite surreal to see literally like the group that like my place is related to mentioned in here, like just in passing. I was just like, oh wow. But it's an interesting concept of like looking at home. Essentially, this whole book is talking about like home burial, which is very interesting to read about, and like how she kind of goes into like how to do it. Obviously, you need somebody who's like this individual, this author who's like kind of registered to do, allowed to do that, because every state is different with their laws and like their requirements with this kind of stuff. And it's not that she's completely poo-pooing on traditional like funeral homes, funeral industry. There's certain points where she's like, yeah, in certain cases you're going to need to maybe work with a local one, just depending on the laws and stuff. But yes, it is still a critical look at it, which is exactly why I wanted to see the other perspectives around. It's not that I necessarily disagree with it. Like it's a valid, there is valid points in here. But yeah, it's just it was an interesting experience to read this book. But again, I did like middle of the road. Like, if you're interested in this topic, like this is such a niche book that I don't feel like everybody would be even interested in reading it. Again, I wanted to read it just because obviously I've been around this industry for a while, so it's like I've seen the side that I've been involved with, which is the traditional side of funeral business. So I was curious to see what like the other alternatives are, some of the perspectives there. But moving along. So next one we have is Scott Cunningham, who's a very well-known author in like, again, the spiritual magical community. And this is Cunningham's Guide to Hawaiian Magic and Spirituality. The whole reason he did this book is because he has lived in Hawaii for many years. So this is kind of like his homage to the culture, I guess you could say. And I rated this 5 stars because it was, again, I'm not very familiar with a lot of the Hawaiian mythology and like the traditional culture that goes back many centuries. So it was very interesting to see and get introduced to this information and explore it a little bit, because again, I wasn't super familiar with it. So yeah, it was a very cool read. So I rated it, again, 5 stars. I think I already said that, but if you guys are interested in learning more about this, definitely do. I would recommend checking it out. Again, another good like introduction, overview of, again, mythology and some of the spirituality practices that were, around for a very long time there. All right, next up we have asteroid goddesses. So again, for those who want to delve deeper into their personal astrology, or maybe the astrology of others, you're going to have asteroids, which can add extra flavor. They're like sprinkles on your natal chart. And so this, I rated 4 stars because, again, it's a good overview to help you to understand these particular asteroids. I think what 16 different asteroids I think they're talking about. I definitely know we're covering, who is it? Like, I mean, we're definitely talking about Ceres. We're talking about Pallas Athena. We're talking about Vesta, Juno. Those are definitely some of the main ones that we go over here, because those are like some of the main, I mean, there's so many different like asteroids and points that you can put into the nature, but those are like some of the big ones, which is why this book talks about them. And again, it just helps to add an extra flavor onto things, especially like I've definitely talked to, like when I used to do personal readings for patrons, I would incorporate astrology into their reading, especially things like Juno, because especially if it was like something like a love reading or a soulmate reading, because Juno can definitely help to give some more detail and some more flavor to that than just looking at necessarily things like the 7th house or where's your Jupiter, yada yada. It helps to add more into that. So this book I rated 4 stars, and it is The Odd Book. Now, again, this is an astrology book, and this is something I definitely wanted to read because I personally have this configuration in my personal natal chart, and you you can have it briefly in transits or progress charts or whatever. But it's also referred to as the finger of God. There's another name that it had, was it the spike? Like there's an older name that in ancient astrology they refer to this as. But yeah, it's a very interesting configuration that can happen in your chart, because again, there's a whole nother layer to astrology and your natal chart that has to do with like how things are actually configured in that circle. I plan on talking about that more on my other channel, but yeah, very helpful book for anybody who is dealing with a yod, because it can be a time dealing with this particular configuration in your chart, especially if you have it natally. It's when essentially things transit those points. So it's like 3 main points that create the yod. It's very important to pay attention to that, because things can happen around those kinds of transits and whatnot. But regardless, again, more astrology books. If you haven't noticed, I read a lot of astrology books, but not as much as like my Pisces twin and all that. But we have Yesterday's Sky, again, another Stephen Forrest book here, and I rated this one 5 stars. Again, this is talking about, if I remember right, astrology and reincarnation. So basically how to use your chart and your information to kind of, and particularly like your south and your north node, to talk about your karmic past life and the lessons that you need to learn and the lessons you learned in the past and how that affects your current life and stuff. It's a very interesting topic for those who want to delve into that side of astrology. Again, great introduction book to get you thinking about it. As I've already mentioned, I really enjoy the way that he writes and the way he organizes his book. There's something about the organization that just scratches my brain in a good way. Our second to last book in this category is Coventry Magick, and this is talking about with candles, oils, and herbs. Again, this is another well-known author and witchcraft person. If you want to dive into this, I gave it 4 stars. Again, it just helps you with understanding how to, work with, candles, different candle practices, spell work, all of that kind of stuff, all kinds of different types of like magic and whatnot. And again, very good intro kind of start and reference for those who want to start delving into their own magical practice. I definitely would recommend. I have another book by her that is specifically the candle magic. So this is more of like the wider scope of magical like practices. But again, the candle magic is very important because that's like part of what started her business and whatnot. And lastly, our last book for this category is Aphrodisiac. So I gave this 3 stars. Again, good middle of the road kind of book with, basic information, different recipes, how to use certain herbs and whatnot. Again, do this stuff responsibly. Check to make sure you're not going to be allergic to something, or if it's going to interact with some medication that you take, because that definitely can happen. Be very smart about when you use stuff like this. But yeah, I think it's a good intro to this whole concept, especially using the aphrodisiac as a part of like self-care or enhancing your relationship and stuff. And it's not as like seedy as you might think when you hear the word aphrodisiac. It's actually quite like gentle. I think it's a much more palatable, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a way, nicer way to introduce this concept to people who may not, like, again, might raise their eyebrows at this topic. But again, a lot of the herbs and stuff that they talk about here can be very helpful especially for women, for hormone stuff. It's not just like the aphrodisiac thing. It can be helpful for other things. And they talk a little bit about that. So again, do this kind of stuff responsibly. Check your sources, double check things. But yeah. So that is my last book in the metaphysical kind of spiritual topic of books. And I think next up, we are going to travel into in a similar vein, we're going to be kind of talking about the books that I had that kind of focus on things like health as well as personal development. So let's jump into that. All right, for those interested in the sort of health as well as like personal, I guess I categorize them as like personal development books. That is what we're going to talk about here. This is not a super big stack, but I'm gonna save some of these. Let's see, what do I want to start with here? So let's talk about these 3 books. So, and I'll get into how I rated each one of them. So I got like the whole like a big set of, what's his name, Joe Dispenza's books here, Dr. Joe Dispenza's books, and let's see. So I think I started, because there is a certain order that you're supposed to read these books in. I mean, there's a recommended order that you should read these books in, because one is like the first book he wrote, and then each one is supposed to kind of like. So I did have an issue with like this whole group of books. I think the first one I read was this one, which was Evolve Your Brain. And again, his story is very interesting. It is very like powerful in the sense of like what he was able to accomplish. And so what the whole point of like why he even started writing these books and researching this is just like the power of the mind and how powerful your state of mind can be to like fully transform your life as well as your health. So I do like the books in that sense. And I gave the first book like 3 stars. I also got, and then with the Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, I also gave it 3 stars. And then we got to Becoming Supernatural. And then there's a 4th one, I think it's called like Being the Placebo or something. Again, all of these books are, I think I gave this one like 2 stars because at this point I was a little bit annoyed because it very much feels like, because again, I really like sat there and I read this book, and then I got to this book and I was like reading it and I was like, a lot of the information is just kind of repeated from this book with just like slight changes, and then it just kind of felt like the same thing here as I started to try to read it. So I think there was a lot of skimming I did in this book at that point. But yeah, I feel like I think that maybe I tried to read these 2 like back to back from each other, and that might have been my problem. This might be a situation where, regardless of which one you start with, you're probably going to find it interesting. Again, if this is like a whole kind of like topic you want to delve into with like the power of the brain and stuff, there's some interesting information here. But again, for me at the time when I was trying to read through like all of them, there was just like a little bit too much of repeating the same information over and over again, where it's like, okay, I got it in the first book, I'm getting it in the second book, like I get what you're trying to say. So it's like there was just a little bit too much of that for me. Should I go back and maybe try to like, I feel like this one I should probably try to go back and reread. I don't know about the placebo one because that one I didn't even include because I didn't really like read it at that point. I was just like, I kind of like skimmed it, and it's like it's covering a lot of the same topics all over again. So it's like I didn't even bother, to be perfectly frank. So I don't know. Again, like 2 stars is what I was giving these at the time, because there is interesting information, but combined, it was just too much of repetitiveness. So next up, I will talk about these 2 together as well. So the first one is the Galveston Diet, which I gave 4 stars. And then sort of her follow-up book is The New Menopause, which I gave this one also 4 stars. So again, she very much like clarifies and corrects some of her information in this one from this one. Again, I picked up these books because I was interested. Obviously, I know there's older women in my life, and as a woman, I think it's more than apparent that you need to be an advocate for your own personal health, because again, topics like this, like menopause and our hormones, is not like very obviously not understood by most of the medical industry because they don't really spend a lot of time to research and talk about that. So yeah, I was curious to look into these books and read a little bit about it to see this woman's perspective about her own research and whatnot. And there's certain things that definitely were very helpful. There's other things that I don't particularly agree with, and it's probably more so from this book, especially when it comes to diet. Yes, there are some like valid points to it, but diet is, regardless of who's talking about it, is a topic that is so personalized, I think, to an individual that, like, I don't like the whole concept of diets because, or only eating a certain very strict way, because it's like, it's trying to tell everybody else that that's the way that they need to also eat. It's like, so yeah, my point is like that is some of my issues with this, is like, I don't think that a one size fit all kind of diet thing works for everybody. So that's my soapbox on that. All right, I'm going to talk about these two books next. Okay, so these two are kind of similar. So the first one I read was The Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And upon reflection, I definitely would rate this 3 stars, because there were concepts and things that I did find interesting. Also, the way that he wrote the book was not bad. And then I also picked up What Clients Love, which I rated like 2 stars. My issue that I have is the same issue that I have with both of these, where it feels very much like a rich man just trying to get richer by publishing a book, which literally is what he suggests in here, is like royalties and publishing books and writing and stuff, because it's a way to get money. So again, it feels like advice coming from somebody who has more money than you. And I don't know, there's a part of me that like feels like, are you legit in what you're saying, or are you just trying to make more money? Like, I don't know, there's just something about it that gives me the ick about both of these books. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's because they're written by men. I would love to read some books that are written by women that have to do with like this kind of topic, and see how I feel about it, if I still get the same amount of ick. I don't know. There's just something about it that just feels like somebody, like, I don't know. It bugs me. So yeah, I didn't, again, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad was written in a way that was entertaining. So that's why I gave it a little bit more of a bump of a star. But again, it just feels like, anyway, moving on to the next one. So the last books in this group I'm going to talk about are specifically related to artists, in that sense. So the first one I have is Draw Stronger. So I gave this like 4 stars, because it is a very like short book. But I think the information is definitely helpful. So essentially, this is just telling you different stretches and little exercises to do if you are an artist, to keep up with your own self-care. Because again, artists, we can be very neglectful sometimes of our own personal health, especially when we're sitting there and we're working for hours on end. We forget to take breaks, we forget to stretch, we forget to drink water, maybe eat food, all that kind of fun stuff. So this is a nice little reminder to like, hey, stop, take a break, do a little stretch to keep up, so that you can keep doing the work that you're passionate about. So, and I think there's like some fun little illustrations in here. So again, very quick, fun little read. Just as a nice reminder of, hey, take care of yourself, because you matter. If you want your work to stay and be good, you need to make sure that you are good as well. So in that same vein, we have a book that was very much doing its rounds and has been doing its rounds for a very long time. And of course, I wanted to see what all the hullabaloo was about. And we have The Artist's Way. I ended up rating this like 3 stars. So I do feel like I should try to redo this book, and maybe I'll document it if you guys are interested in seeing me go through this book and do it. There's a lot of other artists here who have on YouTube who are doing the same thing, and a lot of them have very positive things to say about. There are certain things that were in this book of like exercises that I looked at and I was like, I really don't like that. I think at that point where I was like starting to get like wanting to fight back on it was when there's a particular exercise later on in the book where it's like, you're not supposed to read like anything for like a week or something, like something crazy like that. Had to do with like not reading anything, not consuming like media for like a week. And I just like, I can't, like, clearly I read a lot. So, and it was like the point of like not consuming, other stuff, because, it can impede, like, it felt very much like, oh, you should take a break from reading like this stuff because it's going to mess with your own creativity, or again, you're wasting time by like reading when you could be working on your practice, kind of idea, which, yes, there is some merit to that idea, but at the same time, it's like, I like to read. I'm reading all the time. Like, I mm, um yeah, so I don't know. I had a very weird relationship with this book when I did it the first time. So the one thing I will say that is a very good practice, and I fell off the wagon, was like doing the 3 pages every day. I think that is a very good exercise, and I need to get back on to doing it. But yeah, I don't know. If you guys want me to try to like redo this, let me know in the comments. But next up, we have, again, I rated this one 3 stars as well. We have How to Become an Illustrator. Again, it's a good kind of intro into things to think about when you're like, especially if you want to be like a freelancer illustrator, like in that realm, things to think about, advice and such. So it wasn't a bad read. I mean, some of the stuff doesn't necessarily apply to me personally, but it's still an informative read, especially if you're even remotely thinking about this world, or you're thinking about editorial illustration or anything. Like, this is a good thing to kind of wet your feet into that whole idea, so that you have food for thought and things to think about, because there's more to any artistic field, whether you're thinking about being a tattoo artist, an illustrator, an animator, whatever it is. There's so much more that goes into that job than I get to draw pictures. There's so much more that goes into all of that. So it's important to be aware and to read stuff like this so that you are better informed. And lastly, we have Making Comics. And so I rated this one 5 stars because it was a very interesting, the whole entire book is very interesting because it is literally like done as a comic, and talks about, again, a lot of the basis and things to think about when trying to make a comic, which is something I've been wanting to do for a while, and I've been neglecting that goal, if you watched my goals video. So yeah, that is just something I'm thinking about, and this is a good introduction to that whole concept. Again, food for thought, things to think about. So yeah, that concludes this section of talking about, again, the kind of health-centric personal development books. And yeah, let's move on to the next section, which I believe will be the fiction books. So for those who want fiction books, this is the section that's going to be coming up next for you. All right, now we're into some fun stuff with the fiction books that I read in 2024. And so starting off, we have, because I am and will forever be a huge fan of Rick Riordan, and I will continue to read these books even as an adult, because I am very much invested in this whole world that he's made since I was a very young kid. And so we have the standalone, The Sun and the Star. So this takes place in like the Percy Jackson universe, if you're not familiar. But this is following some characters that we get introduced with later on in the Percy Jackson like universe and things. One of the characters we do meet in like the original run of Percy Jackson and the Olympians. And I think the other character we meet in the Heroes of Olympus, which is kind of like the second series. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But yeah, this is a standalone book that features the two of them. And Rick Riordan actually wrote this with another author, again, which was very smart to make sure that the representation here was accurate. And yeah, it was just a fun little like standalone read, although I definitely think I read these out of order. So again, with your order, there is a little bit of an order that you should be reading them in so that you don't miss context like I did, because I read this first and then I read The Chalice of the Gods, and I'm pretty sure that this comes this comes first and then this comes like next. Like I think what happens here in this continuation of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, yeah, this maybe comes after that because there's something that happened in this book that was introduced and I was like, when did that happen? And I was like, and then I started reading that other book and I was like, oh, I think I'm out of order here somehow. But I digress. Yeah, I rated this, of course, 4 stars because it was a good read, solid read. Again, if you, maybe not everybody is going to be super invested in it, unless you really enjoyed these particular characters because they were never exactly like main characters in the original runs. I mean, sort of in the second, in the Heroes of Olympus, Nico, he is kind of like a main character to a certain extent, and we get a lot of the context that you need for this book in that series. So it's like this is definitely not a book that I think you can read like out of order without having been introduced to the other books. So jumping into again this one, again we have the Chalice of the Gods. So again, he brought back the sort of the original cast of Percy Jackson with Percy, Annabeth, and Grover, and this is whole concept here is he's trying to get his recommendation letters so he can go to college. We love that. We love how the characters are aging and growing and all that fun stuff. So yeah, again, a very not a super thick read, but it was enjoyable, and I gave it 5 stars because again, I'm a sucker. I love Percy Jackson. He is so snarky and funny. Again, such a fun character. And in addition, this all happened this came out in 2024. I think that one maybe came out in 2023. I might be wrong, but again, we have the second book in that same vein, which is The Wrath of the Triple Goddess, and also really enjoyed this. Gave it 5 stars. Perfect. I think this came out around October, which is like perfect timing for this because it has very much spooky themes. Again, it's Percy Jackson. If you know, you know, and you're going to enjoy it regardless. So next up, we have, technically these are light novels, because there are like one standalone illustrations in them, but we have the Ancient Magus Bride, we have the Golden Yarn, and we have the Silver Yarn. So essentially what these are, and let me see what, I think I rated these both the same. Yes, I rated both of these 4 stars. Again, if you're a big fan of the Ancient Magus Bride, which I definitely am, I love that manga so much. I had few little small nitpicks about the anime, but it's still solid. If you enjoyed that world, because there's definitely been a lot of like outbranching set around the world of the Ancient Magus Bride, which I do enjoy that. These all have like little mini stories with some characters that you might recognize from the main series, but yeah, they're all little mini stories and like light novels. So I definitely enjoy this. If you like fairies, especially like real fairies, where not all the fairies are so sweet and loving, this is definitely that's part of why I love the Ancient Magus Bride series, because there's just that level of like more of like what the fae actually are. So if you want some like little bite-sized stories, those are definitely a good read for those who want that. And next up, let's talk about, so I had this book sitting on my bookshelf for over 5 years because I bought it like when it came out, and then I never touched it again, which just seems to be kind of my issue with, we'll get into it. But basically, I finally read The Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood, and I actually really enjoyed it. I rated it 5 stars. I'm a little bit concerned with continuing to read the series, just because I've had this happen. So I got into Sarah J. Maas. Everybody got into Sarah J. Maas. They can not shut up about her book series, which I get it, because it's one of the biggest books that like of recent time that blew up, especially with the kind of content it was, because it's essentially adult, like this is actually her adult book, but the series that everybody knows her really for is of course like the A Court of, was it Thorn and Roses, those books, which were the new young adult series, because the main character was 19 at the start of the book. Not that it made any damn difference because she becomes immortal anyway, and I don't care if that is a spoiler. Everybody and their mother by now knows the story. Regardless, my issue with that book series was I really liked the first book. I read it early on before it like really blew up. Read the second book and really loved that one because of the characters involved in it. Then I read the third book and I was like, I still enjoy it, but there's just something kind of dragging about it. And then I think at that point I read like the little novella that came in between before we switched to the Nesta and Cassian stuff. And I was just like, meh about it. Like it felt like it went kind of like up and then it's just kind of like slowly go down, which I feel like is a little bit of the criticism that I see that a lot of people have for her book series, where it's like it starts kind of well, but then it kind of goes down. Because I did attempt, I think it was in 2024 when I attempt to read the Court of Mist and Fury, which is like that Cassian Neston one. I DNF'd that so hard that I didn't even include it in any of my wrap-ups, whether I attempted that this year or I attempted it in 2024. I did not include it in my like wrap-up because it was just like I did not like it at all. Like I could not. No, it just was not for me anymore. Which is shocking given that I did read this and I did finally get into it and I really enjoyed it. Where it was like, I liked the mystery, I liked the chemistry between the two characters in question in this one. And yeah, I think it was an interesting concept with the whole world. You could see where she's pulling like inspiration from mythology wise to kind of build the city. But I'm a little bit nervous to continue with it because it's like I saw a little bit of like, not a spoiler, but I saw somebody's comment in a review about something happens. I don't know if it's in the next book or the next one after that, but like something happens that made them like, what just happened? And not in a good way. So I don't know. I'm a little bit on the fence with Sarah J. Maas and continuing with her book series. I don't know. You guys let me know in the comments if it's worth exploring the second book, which I think is, oh God, wind and something. I know, something wind related again. Anyway, moving on to the next book. So this was one that I actually picked out at a convention that I was tabling. And I picked it up because it was a mermaid book and I wanted to support the author who was tabling at the con. So something I will say that was very interesting about how she sells her books is that she has two different versions. So this is the adult version of the book, but she also like sells a clean version of the book, I guess you could say, that is for all ages in a sense, or like at least like young adult. I thought that was very interesting. I hadn't really seen anybody do that. But I rated this like 4 stars. I enjoyed it. I think it was a very like kind of cozy read, and it wasn't like the most complicated plot or anything like that. But it was still like a sweet little read, like a little kind of like Little Mermaid-esque situation going on. It did feel like maybe the ending was a little rushed, but overall, it's still like I still enjoyed it. And again, I collect like mermaid books in general, like most of the time. I've talked about it on my other YouTube channel, like all the mermaid books that I have, but yeah, it was a decent read. And of course, the last book that I have for the fiction section is Hunting the Empress, which, if you don't know, I actually did the book cover for this book, but I actually did get to read it too, which doesn't, fun fact, for a lot of times when you do book covers, you don't always get to read the book. If you're lucky, you'll get like a little synopsis, but no, I actually did get to read the book itself, which definitely helped to like come up with ideas, especially for like book 2's cover and stuff like that. Obviously, I rated this 5 stars. So this is very much an adult book. If you want something with spice, if you want something that has like mixes of like, it has an interesting mix of like different supernatural like concepts and like mythology, as well as like some science fiction concepts. So again, as somebody like me who very much likes mythology, folklore, as well as like the UFO kind of idea, like this kind of has a mix of everything going on in it, which is very nice to see. And again, it has got some spicy scenes, like spicy scenes. So if you want some truly, can't stress this enough, spicy scenes, definitely I would, again, as I've already said, recommend reading this book. So yeah, definitely go and check it out. You can find it on Amazon. I'll have it linked down in the description. I have it linked in all my videos because, again, I did do the book cover. So while I'm not like trying to toot my own horn, but it is actually a fun read. So, and again, I got to actually read it, which was very helpful as I progressed to like, because the author wants me to do more of the book covers. So, which is very cool. So yeah, that concludes my fiction section. And still on the same vein of fiction, we're going to move into the manga and comics section because I have a lot to go through here and a lot to say because this is like my bread and butter. I love my manga. I love my comics. I read them a lot now. So let's go ahead and jump into that. All right. Next section, of course, we're talking about the various manga and comics graphic novels that I've read in 2024. And so first off, we have Witch and the Beast, Volume 1 and 2, which I rated both of these like 4 stars. It's a very interesting, like they also turned I want to say it's about these 2 volumes-ish. Actually, no, it's more than that, I think. Anyway, they made it into an anime. It's a very interesting concept. It's kind of weird to get into, like as far as like watching it and reading it. It's just an interesting concept. But basically, you have like witches in this world. You have like bad witches, and then you have like this group of people who kind of like hunt them in a sense. Like, I don't even know how to exactly explain this series because it's very different. And not in a bad way. It is just different. I don't really know something I can easily compare it to. But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed reading it, so and watching the anime. I still need to. I'll see how much more of it I end up reading, but I definitely was watching the anime with my partner. And then, of course, I did read also the first and second volumes of Oshinoko, which, again, this is also turned into an anime, which is why I started reading a little bit of it. I rated both volumes 5 stars. It is very good, especially early on. I've heard some interesting things about later volumes and later parts of the story that I'm just like, I don't know about that. But first 2 volumes, again, this has, like, as far as the anime goes, this has one of the a very crazy opening episode to an anime for a season. It's like over an hour long, and it's just gnarly. Like, it is a gnarly first episode that doesn't necessarily, like, the tone of that first episode doesn't necessarily follow into like the rest of the episodes of the anime very well. Like, the series does touch on some like the anime and stuff does of some interesting concepts, especially within like the entertainment industry, especially set like in Japan and stuff, as well as like social media related, that are interesting, at least as far as I've seen in the series. So regardless, moving on. Next up, we have Sub-Zero, which is actually a webcomic, and I've been reading this one for a while, and then I saw that the author was like releasing a physical volume. I was like, you know what, I'm going to go and I'm going to get this because I do enjoy this series quite a bit. And I rated it 5 stars. Yeah, if you like kind of like lovers to, or enemies to lovers kind of concept, then I would definitely check out this series. The art is pretty good too. So yeah, I enjoyed it, and it was cool to see it with a physical volume. Next up, we have a very, very big volume of the first volume of Berserk, which this is my first time reading Berserk, and it deserves all the hype that it definitely does get. It is very gritty. The artwork is crazy. The line work is insane, and it is very good. Like, it is true. It is a very good series, and it is a cornerstone series of like influence on so many other series and genres like throughout the anime sphere of things. So if you are somebody who wants to, I guess in a sense, explore the classics of anime and manga, or I would say the manga in particular, because the anime hasn't had the greatest luck as far as adaptations go. But yeah, I definitely need to get the other volumes and explore more of this crazy, crazy story. So next up, I have maybe one that has some controversial opinions as far as ratings go and reviews. Satania. I read this a really long time ago from the public library, and I absolutely loved it. And I really, really wanted my own physical copy of it. This is actually a used copy because I don't really think it's in print like anymore. So it's like you're gonna have to get like a used copy. And the condition of this one, like it has a little bit of some roughage on it, but it's still like still together. So yeah, this is a very weird story, and the artwork is very unique. I think I'm trying to think of the series like Journey to the Center of the Earth or something. Like there's a famous like book that people I saw in reviews were basically saying this is just like a copy of. I'm trying to show you some of the artwork. Regardless, I don't care. I again, as somebody who likes like what is it called? Like Made in Abyss, this definitely gives me some Made in Abyss vibes. I read this before Made in Abyss was like out as an anime. So yeah, it's very weird. Like, don't get me wrong, it's very weird. And if you're looking for some, I don't really know if there's like a deep plot. I feel like there's something going on here. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but there is definitely some message here, but I don't know if it necessarily comes to completion and like what it's trying to say. But yeah, it's just a weird journey. If you just want a weird journey story, like check this one out. Next up in sort of my category of kind of weird kind of stories that I checked out, we have Beast. I think I did say that I rated Satania 5 stars, right? Maybe. I also rated this 5 stars. So this is Beast. Basically, it's about like this artist who is hired to make this statue for somebody. I'm not gonna really explain what it is, but yeah, it is a very odd story. I'm trying to remember how it ends, honestly. Yeah, it has just kind of a weird, surreal kind of ending as well. It's another one that it's a weird read for sure. But if you like weird, kind of spooky-ish reads, then I would definitely say that's worth having in your collection. Also, similarly, so this is Smanya. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but I had actually read like all 3 volumes or editions of this story. This is the safest one I can show you on camera. But yeah, this is think like witch hunts and like the devil and like incubus coming in the night. Like those are themes that we cover here in this story. And yeah, again, it's another kind of weird story, but the artwork is very cool. Again, it is an adult story, so just be aware of that. But I think volume 1 I gave 5 stars. I think volume 2 I gave 4 stars, and I can't really remember what I gave in theory to the 3rd volume, because again, I couldn't track that on Goodreads because it wasn't like populating as a listing. But regardless, moving on to Monstrous volume 3. This is another very weird story, and I rated this one 4 stars. Again, it's I don't even know how to explain. It's a like high fantasy world, and it's just crazy. It's and the artwork is amazing. Like the artwork is so detailed to almost the point where, like, especially with volume 1, there are certain panels that almost feel too dark to like really kind of almost read everything. But regardless, it's a very interesting series. I need to pick up the next few volumes as well. But yeah, if you're looking for something like high fantasy, I definitely would recommend this one. So moving along here. So I have a little bit of so again, there's a good chunk of the manga that I have here that are like spicier manga. They're the manga that you would see in Barnes & Noble wrapped in plastic because they're more mature in content. Like literally they have the mature warning on it. Because again, I like that. Sue me. So we have volume 1 and volume 2 of I Can't Refuse, which I know sounds like a very questionable title, and I guess it is. I gave this, what did I give this? So I gave the first volume like 3 stars, while I gave the second volume like 4 stars. So it got a little bit better by the second volume. Again, it's a very classic trope, I'm gonna just say, in like the, not even just manga, but also like certain romance like categories where basically you have the main girl, Miku, who's basically like her father's in debt. So she needs to pay off her father's debt. So she's essentially going to agree to become a wealthy benefactor's mistress in order to pay off that debt. But she's got to be trained first in order to be an adequate mistress by the butler. What more can I say? Okay, I am suspicious about the butler though. But yeah, if you kind of like a Sebastian-esque vibe, again, if you remotely like the butler category, then this is probably worth a read. Again, if you're into that kind of category. Next up, we have volumes 1, 2, and 3 of Apple Black, which, if this sounds even remotely familiar to some of you who are longtime viewers on YouTube of like art content, the author has a YouTube channel and talks about this whole process of creating manga and art and comics and all that kind of stuff. So I was very curious to finally, I was very surprised to actually see these in the bookstore for once, because a lot of times, like, I don't see them, like, in the bookstore. So volume 1, I rated 4 stars. Volume 2, I rated 3 stars. And also volume 3, I rated 3 stars. Just because it is an interesting story. But I don't know, there was just something about like, maybe it was like the tease of like, it's on the precipice of like a really big moment and just kind of waiting for that big moment to happen. Like there's definitely a lot of action. And again, the artwork is fantastic in it as well. So yeah, there's some weird kind of concepts going on in here as far as like how the world and like the power mechanics work. So it's still a series that I'm interested to see like how it develops. But yeah, conversely, kind of like, I don't know, it's like middle of the road for me right now. Next up, this is a series I really, really like, especially because I'm very familiar with the artist, because I got really sucked into her art with a different little series that was an adaptation from a YA book that I was reading at the time. Actually, let me correct that. She has done 2 different adaptations of 2 different book series, and both I got into the actual written novels because of the artwork and because of the little, one was I think Vampire Kisses, and the other one was Solace. I think that's the title of it. I love Solace. Like that got me so into that. But we have Devil's Candy, and so the artist I'm referring to is Rem. But I read volumes 3 and 4, and I love this series so much. I rated both volumes 5 stars. I'd say overall, I rate the series 5 stars. The artwork is just amazing. And again, it's a really interesting story of like, again, kind of this fantasy world where you have like I would say if you grew up liking like Soul Eater, I think you would easily get into this series as well, because it does have some elements that kind of remind me of Soul Eater, which is like this really weird, kooky world. But I love that. Speaking of weird, kooky worlds, next up, we have another favorite series of mine, which is Dorohedoro. I watched the anime on Netflix and got really invested in that. And of course, I wanted to start collecting the manga and reading them as well. And this is volume 5 and volume 6. Again, I rated both of these 5 stars. I just love this world. It's so weird. It's so kooky. And I love that even the antagonists, like or like the villain of the series is still very like likable, and like doesn't necessarily feel like a villain either. Like everybody feels kind of morally gray, which just makes for a very interesting story. But yeah, also violent, bloody. Again, it is for mature audiences, so just be prepared for that if you want to pick this up. Sometimes I don't see it in Barnes and Noble. Like I was very surprised I saw those 2 volumes last year in the store, because it's sometimes really hard to find that series. In the same vein of mature series, and again, this one got anime and became very popular. We have My Dress Up Darling, volumes 10 and 11, which I rated volume 10 and volume 11 both 4 stars, because this was definitely an uptick. I think it was volume 9. I was like, okay, where is this going? And I still, a big part of me, like at this point in the series, is like, where is it going? Like, are we gonna get like some forward momentum here as far as like the plot, which really I would say the main plot is like a will they won't they kind of situation in a way, of when these 2 characters are finally going to get together. And I feel like we're finally starting to get to that point, of 11 volumes in. So it is a little slow at this point, but like the first 4 volumes are fantastic, but then everything after that has been fairly slow. But I think it's starting to pick up, especially with volume 11. It's starting to get back up into that. At least I'm hoping. We'll see how volume 12 goes, but that's my current review on that. And then I was very, very excited to see this. So if you do, I don't know if I've ever really mentioned this on anything, but I really loved Beastars. That is one of my favorite series as well. And I have the whole volume, all of the volumes, including also this particular author. She has done some like anthology series, essentially, of like mini stories, and that was called Beast Complex, and there was a volume 1, and I thought that was all there was going to be. How wrong I was. We have a volume 2 and a volume 3, and I gave these both 5 stars because I love this world. It's so interesting, it's so engaging. Again, I know people get so caught up with Beastars with like, it's furries, like you need to move past that, because underneath that you have such a fascinating, like, complex character drama, society, mafia storyline. It's great. If you can just get past the furries and the furries doing things together, like, you have a really cool story. That's my soapbox. Anyway, moving along here. We have, of course, another anime that was super popular and blown up. So, of course, I started collecting the manga to see what the deal was, because I've heard that it goes real hard later on. It gets real weird as well. We have Chainsaw Man. And so I have volume 4. I read volume 5 as well as volume 6, which finally was getting into territory that they did not cover in the anime. The anime is not... like, the anime does not even touch the iceberg of like the craziness. The movie we're about to get is covering definitely like this arc that we're getting into right here. So basically I actually rated all 3 of these, again, 5 stars. Like, they were all very interesting. Like, at this point in the story, things are really interesting. I don't think I rated some of the other earlier volumes as high, but they were still at least like a 3-star or above. So yeah, this author does a fantastic job, and so does all of his assistants, which I'm going to get into, because I literally have 2 other series sitting over here that are done by his assistants. His assistants went on to do their own absolutely insane series, which one of them is like one of my favorite ones. Moving into another favorite. Again, this was another recent anime from the last like year or so, and I love it so much. The second season is actually airing right now, and we have The Apothecary Diaries. I love this series so much. Both me and my partner, we were obsessed. We're both collecting the physical volume. So obviously I have volume 1, volume 2, volume 3, and volume 4. I read those all last year, and pretty sure I rated all of these like 5s across the boards, because it's just such a good series. Like, the like a mystery, also a little bit of like, I mean, it's really the mystery, but also like the interesting like apothecary, like herbs and whatnot stuff. It's just a fun series. If you haven't checked this out, it's a cool period drama, definitely kind of vibe. Love it. So next up, in fact, we're going to talk about now probably one of my favorite series to date right now. And again, it's also rated mature, as is seems like everything I get manga wise right now. We have Dan to Dan. I love Dan to Dan so much. And I'm finally to the point now in like the volumes where I'm reading because I was reading it online, but then I stopped reading it online to start collecting the physical volume. So I'm finally getting past what I've already read in the past. I love it so much. Again, these are all going to be 5s across the boards, regardless of. Again, this is that series where I saw some people trying to be critical about the anime and like some of the scenes that happen. And I love seeing other people coming to defend those scenes and explain like, hey, no, like these scenes can actually, like I appreciate these scenes because it's showing the female lead, Momo, actually getting herself out of really sticky situations. She's not relying on anybody else. She's relying on her own power to do so. So it's like, thank you. But yeah, I read volume 5, volume 6, volume 7, volume 8, volume 9, and volume 10. I love this series so much. Like, I cannot. Like, the artwork is amazing. The monster designs are amazing. I love that is literally a combination of the 2 things I love, which are like supernatural content, ghosts, monsters, as well as like UFOs and aliens. Like, again, I grew up on X-Files. I love the show Supernatural, which is just X-Files Love Child. Yes. So it's like I love that whole concept in the first volume of this just immediately hooked me, and I was just obsessed from there. And again, the anime has been doing a fantastic job as well as far as adapting it. So next up. So this is a really interesting series because I read this manga's other series called Ran in the Gray World because I saw the artwork and I was just like, I need it. The artwork is so nice. It just scratches my brain in the best way possible. And so we have Go with the Clouds, North by Northwest. And this is volumes 3, volume 4, as well as volume 5. And I think, what did I rate these ones? So I rated, again, across the boards, rated it 5 stars. The artwork is just absolutely gorgeous. Are you kidding me? This whole entire story takes place in what, Iceland? Yeah, I think it's Iceland. Because the author actually went to Iceland like multiple times, so she was very inspired by the landscape and everything. But she does really interesting stories, and this one is no different, where you have an interesting like power system as well. But again, it's just the artwork. I cannot with the art. It's so gorgeous with the line art and everything. It's just like, it's so good. So yes, I highly recommend, if you want something visually stunning, I definitely recommend this. Although I think the better intro one, because again, this story is very, very unique. I think the more like slightly more mainstream one, I guess you could say, is Ran in the Gray World. I think that will be more of an easy like intro. Like if you read that, I think you're more better prepared for like the slight weirdness of this one. Because I don't know, it might be the opposite, because I think this one is a little bit more mundane in a certain way than Ran in the Gray World, which is like way more fantastical. So it could go either way. Like you could start with Ran in the Gray World, and that could get you really invested in the artwork, but just be prepared that this is still going to be stunning, but it's going to be a little more calm in a way, like in tone, while that Ran in the Gray World feels very like bubbly and exciting, while this is like a little bit more of like smooth jazz or something. I don't know. Moving along. So I read and I finished this series because it's only 4 volumes. We have That Wolf Boy is mine. Such a funny title. But yes, we have volume 2, volume 3, and volume 4. And I think I did rate these ones different from each other. Let me double check here. So volume 2 and 3, I rated 3 stars, while the last volume I did rate 4 stars because it did have a sweet ending. Again, it's a very short read. If you liked Fruit Baskets, you'll probably like this because it is very like Fruit Basket-esque. Like Fruit Baskets-esque, maybe a little bit, no, not really Orange Host Club, but there is almost like a little bit of flavor of like that. So, and this is, teen kind of story, takes place in school, but there's a magical aspect to it of like, again, think Fruit Baskets, and then you'll get the idea of like kind of the theme of like what's happening here. But again, it's an all right read, very like middle of the road for me, not bad, but definitely enjoyable. Now, going into a weird read of mine, a weird selection in my collection, but as we should know, you should be getting the idea by now that I like some weird stories. So we have Rooster Fighter, volumes 2, volumes 3, and volume 4. And it is exactly what it sounds like. Think like Kaiju number 8 mixed with a rooster. Like, so to clarify that, we have like the idea of like kaijus, and this rooster goes around and fights them. Basically, that's the baseline explanation of this series. So yeah, it's legit a chicken. Like, don't get that to it. It's not like a Beast Star situation. It's a literal chicken, literal rooster. Period. But it's so funny. I rate this like 5 stars, all 3 volumes. It's just entertaining to me. I just like the idea. The artwork's also very good. But again, you're just watching this chicken go and fight, and I don't know. Like, I can't explain it more than that. It's going to be a very niche choice for some of you, but some of you would definitely get it. And like, yeah, Rooster Fighter. I support it. All right. Here, again, no surprise to anybody, this is going to be another set of 4 volumes that I all rate 5 stars because I absolutely am obsessed with this series. Not only am I obsessed with this series, but I'm obsessed with this particular artist because this artist did one of my favorite adult webcomics that was like circulating around online that I read, called, why am I forgetting the name? Lilith's Cord. And again, I just am obsessed with the way they make the art, like the way they color. It's something about the way that they color that just, again, scratches my brain in that best way possible. And you can read this series on Webtoon, like the platform Webtoon, and that's where I was reading it. And I saw there was physical volumes getting published, so of course I had to collect them because I love this series that much. And we have Jungle Juice, and I read volumes 1. And again, I've already read this series. Like, they just released season 2 just today as I'm filming this. So I'm so excited. We have volume 2, read volume 3, and of course, volume 4. This concept is so cool too. So basically, think The Fly, but with like college age students and and also adults. But basically, you have this situation where basically this bug spray gets released and people used it and they bought it, and then they sprayed bugs, and basically the bugs fused with their body, so they become half of whatever that insect is. And so our main character, he's fused with a dragonfly, and it just kind of snowballs from there. It's really good. If you like some action, and again, I will try to find a good panel of just like the way the art is. I don't know. There's just something about the artwork. But like, again, there's just something about the way the colors are. I don't know. It just scratches my brain. But anyway, moving along. So next up, this was another series that I saw people talk about, and then I saw I was getting an anime. And it was, considered a little more adult in content. So I was curious, but I was kind of disappointed, to be perfectly honest with you. So the series is Chained Soldier. So basically, volume 1, actually both volumes I rated 3 stars. It's very middle of the road. It feels a little bit like slightly old school, like fan servicey, but I don't know. There's just not much I feel like right now to the plot. Like the idea was kind of interesting when I first heard about it, but I don't know. I don't know if I should try to read at least one more volume and see if it gets better. But as of right now, like just based off the 2 volumes, like I have no interest in continuing this series. It just, I don't know. It just, maybe because it feels like too much of something else that, like in this realm of like the ichi manga anime sphere, it just like feels very like 2000s. While I feel like a lot of more modern series have kind of pulled away from that. So I don't know. You let me know if I should continue this series, if it gets better. Like, because right now, just like, okay, here's a monster, and then here's some, fan service on top of it. And I know that's kind of the point of the series, but I need a little bit more, like plot wise. So next up, we have, of course, the classic. We have Black Butler. I've forever loved this series. So we have volumes 20 and 21. Again, 5 stars. Okay, if you have not like read the Black Butler mangas, you are missing out on just so much good story. Like it is such a cool series because again, the artwork is very like shoujo style, but it is a shoshin story. And the anime, like especially like the first 2 series, did not do it justice at all. While the more newer series that they've let out that are like specific, they're literally centered on specific arcs from the manga, like the school arc, the Book of Atlantic arc, the circus arc. Like those are a lot better because they're like 1-for-1 adaptations from the manga, so they're actually decent. All right, here's another one that I know is going to raise some eyebrows with the title. And again, they were wrapped in plastic. So I was like, I'm going to get it. It was my impulse buy from the bookstore. It's actually only rated older teen, like 17 plus. It's not even, because like honestly, the scenes in it are not the most graphic scenes that I've ever seen. But I rated volume 1 3 stars, and I rated volume 2 2 stars, because it's just like, is not the most mind-blowing series, but we have basically we started a threesome, and that about sums up the story. Basically, these 3 get together, and again, that's part of why I grabbed this series, because it's like it's so rare to see this dynamic of like a girl with 2 guys, although it's starting to become more popular for sure. And yeah, I just wanted to see what it was about. It's not the most groundbreaking story, and I think there's only 3 volumes of it, so I probably will just go and get the 3rd volume at some point, just so that I have it finished. Like I have the full series, but it wasn't the most amazing thing I ever read. All right, now we're getting into some of my. This is sort of the stack I have in front of me of just like single volumes that I read in 2024. So of the manga at least. So we of course have Hell's Paradise, because I watched the anime and it was absolutely insane. So I started collecting the. And you know what's also crazy is like I guess you can read this on Webtoon now, which is just the weirdest thing. Like I was not expecting that. Webtoon has grown so much in the years I've been reading it. But yeah, this is a crazy story. Highly recommend if you like something weird. Some is a good one. I rated this one 4 stars. So it's a good introduction to the series. Just give it a read. If you like Edo, is it Edo period or if you like your ninja samurai kind of idea, like, but also like mixed with Attack on Titan to a certain degree, like I think you'll like that series. So next up, we got Yakuza Lover. This is definitely like my trashy drama series that I'm reading. And again, it is mature. This is volume 4. I can already tell you that in this year, I've read way more than this volume. So I rated it 4 stars. It's not too bad. Again, it's just like trash TV. Like, it's trash drama, mafia with a lot of adult content mixed in. So if you like that vibe, this is my like guilty pleasure one. Next up, we have, this is a series I also really love. Watch the anime. This is The Land of the Lustrous. And it's just a really cool, very, again, unique, weird series. And so this is volume 4, rated it 5 stars. Interesting artwork. And again, it's just really the concept of it that is very interesting. Again, you have like these girls, they're all gems. Like, they're literally like sentient crystals. And you have this weird dynamic of they're fighting these. Just go and read it. Just go read it. Again, interesting artwork. Of course, next up, we have a Goliath of a 2024 anime, I would say, that just blew up. And that is, of course, Volume 1 of Frieren. The Feel All the Feels series. That is this. And, of course, I rated it 5 stars. It's very good. And if you like your high fantasy, but you want something slower paced, it's about the journey and the people we meet along the way. And starting to appreciate the people and not just leaving, you'll just go read it. I think I've already kind of mentioned this one, but as like an example of something, we have Kaiju number 8. I really like this series a lot. I rated it 5 stars, watched the anime. This is the only volume that I've bought so far of the series, but it has some good comedic hits for me, where basically you have this guy who's part of a kaiju cleanup crew, and then something happens and he becomes a kaiju. And that's all I'll say. So it's cool. Of course, we have, I just said Goliath of an anime. We have volume 2 of Attack on Titan, because I have started to collect the volumes, and rated 4 stars. It's Attack on Titan, man. If you don't know about Attack on Titan at this point, like, go watch it. This is one that probably not a lot of people are going to know, and this was like a used copy that I picked up. But I read this series a really long time ago, and I really loved it. So that's why when I saw the volume, I was like, I'm going to get it. This is The Wallflower. This is volume 1. I think I rated this, 4 stars. It has an interesting art style. Basically, the plot is like these really beautiful boys live in this house and they rent it, but they are having issues affording the rent. So the landlady's like, okay, if you can get I think it's her niece, if you can make her like presentable to society, essentially, then I'll make your rent free. And so the girl in question, she's like a huge horror buff, and she's like, I just want to live in the darkness. I don't know. It's just a comedic, weird little series that, again, I read it a really long time ago. And so I was like, let me just get the volume, because it's just for the feels, for the old memories. And our last manga, we have Zombie Loan, Volume 3. This is a series that I started so long ago because I love Peach Pit. Peach Pit did the series Ciarra. That's the one that really got me like hooked. But they also did some other well-known series, I would say, at least for like the early 2000s. But yeah, this is an interesting concept of like basically this girl, she can see, I guess was it like with people who are dead or about to die, because they have like a ribbon around their neck that she can only see. But yeah, basically, yeah, these guys are kind of zombies, and it's this whole concept. But yeah, I rated this 3 stars. It is very like middle of the road. It's also been a while since I read like the first 2 volumes, but it's not bad. Which, if you want kind of a different take on like a zombie concept, I would recommend that. But yeah, that is all the manga. This is such a long section, I know. But we're going to finally move into wrapping up this video. Final category, and I almost forgot about it. We have my miscellaneous selection, which basically consists of kind of art books as well as like nature-related books, sort of like a lot of reference material that I picked up. So the first one I have is the Audubon for the mid-Atlantic. So I grew up with a Audubon book for California because that's where I'm from, or where I was born, and I grew up a good half of my life. So, and I was always hiking and going outside. So I had a California Audubon book that I brought with me everywhere because I'm very much a nature girl. And so when I moved to the East Coast, I was like, for the state that I'm in, I was like, I really want an Audubon book just like that for here. But there was never one specifically for my state until I finally figured out, oh, this kind of covers like the general area of where I am. So I'll just get this. So again, it's a good reference, especially if I'm going to go on like a long hike, but it's also really great as like an artist. If I want to do some artwork that features, you know, local wildlife or something, this is a great reference for me to look up something and to find inspiration. I think, again, there's so many things that you can use as inspo that you are not necessarily like an art related, like an art specific resource. Okay. So next up, I have Southeast Foraging, because again, relatively like my area. I've watched a bit of foraging content and content creators on like TikTok and stuff, and I think it's such an interesting thing. I've never actually attempted it. I would just feel like I would need to do so much more research in order to feel prepared to do something like that. But I think it's just, again, it's fascinating. So of course the Audubon book I gave 5 stars. This I gave 5 stars as well. And yeah, it's just really helpful. And again, you can use it as a resource to like look up these things. But yeah, if you're interested in foraging, I think that's a good, especially if it's like you're in, again, the Southeast, that might be a good resource for you to add to your collection. Next up, I gave this one like 3 stars because it's very in the middle of the road. And I mainly got this as a resource, like artistically. We have Newport News, the Vintage Postcard Tour. So basically, like this was a whole thing, like, you know, in the early, like 19 years. Like this one is from when? Like 1911. Like they did these postcards for the area of Newport News, which is near where I live. So I just thought it was really interesting and such a good like artistic resource to like see these old postcards and the way the buildings and the way just the history of the area changed over time. I just think it's really interesting. Again, it's not like there's a lot of like information to this book, but as a visual resource, I think it's, again, solid. Okay, next up. So this is a book that I picked up many years ago at like a thrift store. And I thought, ooh, I'm interested. And so it's like an anthology series of mini stories called Vampire Stories from the American South. And so I finally, in 2024, I was like, I'm going to read this. Yeah, I give it 1 star. So I did read like the first few stories, and then the rest of them I just kind of like skimmed through. It's not good. Like legit, like again, I don't want to sound mean or something, but the writing for a lot of these is just not that good. And again, it's not like I'm saying like I'm an amazing writer or anything. I have written in the past, but it's like also the stories were just kind of weird. But yeah, no, it was not my cup of tea. So kind of DNF'd it. Did read like the first few stories, but it just was not my cup of tea. Sorry about that. So I'll have to wrap up this section without my mic because my mic has died. So next book I was going to talk about is Sex in the Sea, which I know is going to raise some people's eyebrows with the name of the book, but it's so funny. Like this book was great. I gave it 5 stars, and this is kind of a special book to my heart because it's actually something that I picked up on one of my like first-ish dates with my partner. We went to the aquarium and I saw this. I saw the title. I was just giggling because I obviously watched Sex in the City before, so it's like the play on that was really funny. The writing has some great jokes in it, but also it's just fascinating information. Like this basically covers and talks about the reproductive life of various sea creatures, and makes it so entertaining to read. It's also just super fascinating. The ocean is such a wild place with some of the stuff that like goes on. Like, it is wild. Like, I highly, highly recommend this book if you're curious about the ocean life, and especially in this realm of things. Very much love this book. So next up, I also have, in a similar vein, I definitely picked up this as a reference heavily, but it also is related to like the area that I live in. So this is the Field Guide to Fishes of the Chesapeake Bay. And so, yeah, it's exactly what it sounds like. And I gave this like 3 stars, I think. No, 4 stars, excuse me, 4 stars. Again, exactly what you think. It is a field guide. It is a field guide to various fish. And again, I like the illustrations to use as like a reference. So I definitely picked up on that. And then next up, this was actually a book that my brother gave me a couple Christmases back. And in the same vein as like that one audiobook that I listened to, we have The Book of Yokai, which I gave 5 stars. It goes into so much more than just like, oh, let's just talk about, you know, Yoni or, you know, or like Kappa or whatever. It's like, it dives into more than just that because it kind of gives some context to where these stories kind of first started, or where even some like the documented artwork was collected. And it just gives you more context to understand how so much of this folklore and stuff comes about. So really, really good. If you're interested in anything Japanese mythology or folklore related, I definitely say that you should have this book in your collection. Great resource. And then lastly, the next 2 books that we have are art book kind of related. So we have The Undying Tales by Stephanie Law, who's an artist that I absolutely love. And basically she does this where she'll do like these art challenges that have to do with like animals that are endangered or near extinction or are like technically extinct. But for this book, she also combined it with like different mythology, like a mythological creature that kind of goes in hand with it. So again, if you want something that kind of touches on that, as well as like animal conservation, or just you want something with really pretty art, then I definitely recommend adding that to your collection. And lastly, we have Fairies of the Fault Lines. I've been following this artist for a really long time, so I really wanted this book. And again, it's very cool artwork, and it's done in a way that's kind of like journal entries for like encountering these various fae-like creatures. And what I especially loved, and I was so excited about when I first like opened up the book, was that there was like a little statement by Brian Fraud, who is a very big name in like the fantasy and fairy artists community. Like he did the designs for like the goblins and stuff in Labyrinth, which is one of my favorite movies. So, and I have actually one of his like a oracle deck with his artwork on it. So big inspiration to me as well. And to so many others who've done like fairy illustrations and whatnot. But yeah, that is the last book in my miscellaneous collection. So we'll go ahead and we'll also talk about some other stuff. All right. Oh, I know this is going to be such a long video, but bear with me. So lastly, I'm going to talk about my reading goals for 2025. As you know, as I said at the beginning of the video, my 2024 goal with Goodreads was 72 books. Or was it 71 books? Am I right? Nope, it was 72. And I clearly blew that out of the water. So, but for 2025, I've only set my goal for 20 books, which I know sounds absolutely ridiculous because it's like, I'm going to blow through that real fast, which was sort of my intention because I'm trying not to make reading this year feel like work. I wanted to stay very much in that hobby realm of things and not try to make it too complicated. But I also don't know if I'm, selling myself short on that goal. I don't know. I didn't intend to try to make it like a big task. Like I need to read 20 books this month and 20 books this month and like go like that. I just want to kind of make it more of a relaxed situation. But the caveat to that is I really, really want this year to read books that expand my genre range. Because as I kind of already mentioned, if you go downstairs and you look at my book collection, this is a different set of books. But like my fiction books, it's like it's so much from like my YA days, and that's like kind of all I have on my bookshelf, with the exception of like a few small picks here and there of some adult books, usually in the fantasy supernatural genre. So it's like I really want to expand and try to read some books that are, you know, outside of that, like more horror books, more thriller, more mysteries, or, you know, other things. Like I really would like to try some other things other than YA. I really do not want to read. I really don't think I want to read any more of that at that point. I think other than like Ricky Riordan, that's the only exception to the rule, because I just, again, I'm that is very near and dear to my heart, is that series and his books. So that is where I am thinking as far as my goals. How am I going to achieve that? So the interesting thing about Goodreads this year is they've added on this additional, like these additional challenges where it's like, oh, if you read a book within this genre of like the selection of books that are like, a lot of them are handpicked from like whatever have been like the most talked about books on other people's like TBRs essentially. If you read one of these books, you tick off that challenge. So I think that's a good way for me to start like branching out and trying books that would never normally consider reading. Um, Although it is a little bit daunting for me to pick which ones I want to try, because I I'm cautious about like trying to conserve my money and also my space, because I don't really have a lot of space left for books on my bookshelf. So it's like I don't necessarily want to pick something that I'm going to hate. But I can just, you know, I need to remind myself that I can just give it away, or I can sell it, or whatever. I need to put it in like a public, like little, like, what are those things called? The little book, like grabby things. I forget what they're called. You'll know what I'm talking about. It's like, it could be outside a park or like a public space where it's like that little, like, little library, like box that you grab and you just grab a book and put a book in or whatever. Something like that. The other thing, so as sort of my final wrap up to this video, so that's the goal, and I think the Goodreads like little extra challenge thing might help me to do that. But my little call to action for you all who stuck with me to watch this video, I would love for you in the comments to tell me what your favorite book that you read of 2024 was, as well as your least favorite book that you read, and if there's any additional books that you feel that I should read that would help me to expand my library of genres that I've tried. And again, that could be anything from, you know, if you want to add on to sort of the categories that I have here, broken everything down. Maybe if it's like, oh, one of your favorite books was like a personal development book, feel free to drop that down in the comments. Or you have a manga series that you, based on what I was raving about, that you think I would love. But I'm very curious to know what you guys read in 2024. Also, like audiobook wise, if you have some that you really enjoyed and you recommended, I'd be curious to know about that as well. But yeah, this has been a very long video, and I applaud anybody who's stuck with me and actually watched the whole thing. But if you only like jumped around to here and there, I thank you so much for that as well. But yeah, remember to check out all my links down in the description, and I will see you in my next video. Bye-bye.